We're joined by two very, very special guests. YC Deweshwar, the chairman of ITC, and former power minister, a close aide of the Prime Minister himself, who the Prime Minister does rely on very often, Suresh Prabhu. Thanks very much, both of you, for being with us. Mr. Deweshwar, I'm going to begin with you. A lot of your counterparts from India Inc. said it's a great initiative. They've all lauded it. I know you like it as well. But the question is, and it's my job to ask you as a journalist, are there enough enabling policies to make this happen? Will an initiative like this really help investment finally break ground?
Now, of course, people will not come here just because we invite them. People will come here if the ground here is fertile for investment. It is the nature of capital that it goes where it can multiply itself. It is not going to come here because India wants it and India's purpose would be served. It will come here because its own purpose would be served, and it will come in its own enlightened interest. So therefore, the reforms that he has set into motion to support this, this strategy is to reform the regulatory environment so that we don't put cart before the horse, so that we don't burden industry with the regulatory overload. So he said in his speech, he said there should be self-certification. I would like to trust the Indian citizens. So self-certification, if it is backed by audit, and then if somebody is found to be not compliant with the standards that are required, then there will be, incentives and disincentives. So there will be penalties for non-compliance. I think that way we will also have fewer people inspecting what others are doing, and also there will be very little corruption.
See, actually, if you really look at it, if for India's long-term growth, we really need to increase the GDP substantially. The GDP consists of services, manufacturing and agriculture. Services are already 60% of the economy. The agriculture share has been declining rapidly. When it declines in this particular way, that means there are more and more people depending on the smaller and smaller share of income. So the only way we can allow the sustainable growth model for India, which will actually help in removing poverty, which will remove the type of income equality that exists, is when you can create more jobs into sectors other than services and other than agriculture. And that's the only sector which can actually make that happen is manufacturing. If you really look at services, services means by definition has to service something. What is it servicing? If you do not have a stable manufacturing base for India, how would India be able to really be stable economy in the long term? So now we are $2 trillion. I'm sure if you grow at 8-9%, will be $10 trillion in another 15-20 years time. When that happens, if in $10 trillion, if the $4 trillion, which is 40% of that GDP, is not going to come from manufacturing, I don't think we'll be able to really address the social issues, which are income equality issue or the poverty issues, or will not be able to actually sustain the services sector as well if we do not do that. And therefore, I think Prime Minister's initiative is absolutely timely. It is most appropriate, and it is something which is really going to sustain India's growth in the next few years' time, maybe even more than 10% if we really increase the manufacturing. And China did that. See how China could remove poverty. China's share of China is now almost close to a $9 trillion economy. That has happened only because China could actually create 40% of the GDP coming from manufacturing. And that's how the poverty got reduced, that's how the middle class was created, and that is what India needs.
Right. I think everyone has a fair idea what India needs. I guess the key issue is how are you going to get there. But Mr. Deweshwar, if I could come to you, one of the key concerns was on SEZs. Is there a little bit of a disappointment that there was no policy roadmap laid out as far as SEZs are concerned? What incentives could be given just to catalyze manufacturing, just to be a catalyst for manufacturing? Disappointed that there was nothing specific on SEZs?
From my point of view, he's talking about corridors, right? That's the same thing. That provides infrastructure for industry to get cost competitive. But the way he's approached it now, any state that brings the reforms, the whole state can become competitive. You don't need a special SEZ or special zone. And then he's got these 100 smart cities. So these 100 smart cities can be so designed as to also keep, Make in India theme at its heart, to build the infrastructure, to create facilities for skills development in a manner that smart cities have both social and business and manufacturing infrastructure built at the same time. So there are industries that cannot be centralized in one location. Many industries, for example, linked to agriculture, they have to be decentralized. They have to sort of begin to process right from the farm gate, and then it has to be in semi-urban and rural areas, and those industries are very important for distributed employment opportunity.
Mr. Prabhu, the other key issue is labor laws, which need to be addressed. We heard the industry minister indicate that that's something that the government will look at, but it's not going to be easy because the powers lie with state governments. Do you expect that we would finally see some labor reforms? Do you see the centre and states working together on that front?
This is another misconception that the word that we use, labor reform. Has any labor come to us and told us that reform us? It's not labor reform. It's a part of a large-scale intervention to create more jobs. So the laws which come in the way of creating jobs, those laws needs an amendment. So therefore, there is nothing like labor reform. There is a huge employment generating initiative that government is going to launch as a part of manufacturing policy. It is obvious that if in manufacturing, you really need some number of people when you get an order. Now, if the order is not there, and if still you want to continue with the employment, it is not in the interest of the employer or the employees. So therefore, such laws needs to be changed, but in the light of creating more employment. These laws are not against employees, but they are for employees, for creating employment. The best thing employee wants, a worker wants, is employment. He doesn't want a guaranteed law which does not give employment. So therefore, those laws which have come in the way of creating employment, so therefore, there are anti-employees laws needs to be changed.
Fair point indeed. I mean, you cannot really blame labour laws for all the woes in manufacturing. But Mr. Deweshwar, the Prime Minister has argued, and very emphatically so today, that fiscal incentives and tax breaks are actually irrelevant to woo manufacturing, and the focus should really be on creating physical infrastructure. How much do you really agree with him? Do you really believe that fiscal incentives, tax breaks, even though they be announced by countries like China, are actually really passé?
No, what he meant was that the core issue is whether the ecosystem in India is world-class and competitive, and that is going to reward the investor by being here as compared to anywhere else in the world. So only if you have some deficiency would you want to overcome that deficiency by layering it with some incentives. I think that's the point he was making.
Fair point indeed, but the Prime Minister spoke about how corporate India was actually looked upon as a suspect. Profit was a bad word just a few months back. Do you believe by launching this initiative in partnership with corporate India, with all of you really present there in tow, is the attempt to really bridge the trust deficit? Is the trust really being restored?
Well, corporate India does not is waiting for a better climate. Corporate India, it's a boon for investors. Corporate India is not going to be second to anyone in grasping this opportunity. The point that he made was that you can go abroad, but don't go abroad after helplessness that you could not make it work here. So if you can make it work here in India, why would you go anywhere else?
Mr. Prabhu, let you have the last word then. Comment on this, on relations between government and corporate India. The Prime Minister spoke about how corporate India was looked at with a certain amount of suspicion. There was a complete lack of trust over the last couple of years. Profit was a bad word. Do you think all of that has changed?
Yeah, that's what he mentioned also on the 15th of August. See, the making Indian business grow means we create more employment in India. Just imagine the Tata Group, which is working in almost all sectors of the economy, and they have created millions of jobs, directly or indirectly. So if we have more of such business enterprise growing, who are willing to take risk, which common person cannot take. He takes the risk and he does business. He has the entrepreneurial ability. He has a balance sheet, so he can attract more capital. By allowing such organization to grow, what are we doing? In turn, for their own growth, they are going to hire people, which is going to create employment. That employment, as there will be middle level employment, there is a top level employment, there will be also level employment at manufacturing and shop floor. All of that creates wealth for the people as well as for the country. That creates a purchasing power, which the Prime Minister was talking about. How do you actually have a sustainable growth if there is no purchasing power in the hands of and the pockets of the people? How would that come? If there is no employment, and that employment also is not stable. If you hire a person for a courier job, is it a stable employment, or is it better to have an employment for a steel worker or a motor car worker who will actually, his salary will keep growing, he will have a insurance, he will have a provident fund, he will have a pension, his family can grow, and that's how the growth will come about. So employment creation through manufacturing has a huge spin-off effect in many sectors of the economy. I will also bring in well-being of the people, and that's what the Prime Minister talked about.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.